Hello and welcome to the Adventure Effect Live with Tom and Curtis. We are discussing the confluence of adventure, spirituality, and business, and the global transformation that's possible at the convergence of these three areas of life. Today we're really excited to have Kate Strong join us. Kate has a double master's in mechanical engineering. She's a Ironman triathlete, and she also works with businesses and leaders to help them find their voice within adventure. In January, so just over a month's time from now, she is embarking to become the first woman to cycle continuously for 24 hours and breaking 3 Guinness World Records in the meantime. And as if that wasn't enough, she's then going on in 2022 to compete in the race across America, a 3,000-mile cycle race, followed immediately by a swim across the English Channel, which is 21 miles, and then off to climb Everest, all in the space of 12 months, because why not? So Kate, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
It's so good to have you. Yeah, when you mention it in one sentence, I sometimes forget that I'm the one who actually created that and is going to go and do it. So it does sound a little wild.
It sounds a little wild even to us, yes. So normally we begin this show by asking our guests what adventure means to them. But just as we were talking before going live, we realized that you've kind of already had quite a day. And you've been for a 4.5-hour cycle ride, you've had your ice bath, and you are looking radiant, you're glowing. You mentioned that you've been through quite an emotional process today. So we thought it would be fun to start, instead of asking you what adventure means to you, but just tell us about your process and the link between adventure and emotional release.
Yeah, that's great. And thanks so much for inviting me here and to share a little bit about my philosophy as well. And yeah, today was quite an interesting day because in January last year, if you'd have asked me, a 4.5-hour ride would have been my pinnacle. But nowadays it seems to be my warm-up because I do multiple 12-hour days regularly to train for my world records. So today I thought it would just be banking the hours and sitting on the bike, getting the physical legs moving. But what actually opened up was an emotional wave, pretty much. I found myself reminiscing a lot in why I got into my sport, how sport has actually allowed me space to shine, to be myself, to find myself, to give myself permission as well. And today there was a lot of tears because the reason I suppose I started sports, I mean, I've always been sporty. I've always done activities, but when I committed to being who you see today, I was still in quite a toxic relationship. I was with a guy for 9 years, and incrementally and over time, my voice was heard less and less, to the point where even my no's were ignored in many situations. So it was quite an abusive relationship, and I was engaged to him. We were going to get married, and the only outlet I found was running. I couldn't run a mile, but that half an hour when I'd leave the house, put my trainers on, was the only half an hour he couldn't control me. My phone was also being monitored. So even if I left the house outside of permission, he would call me to find out what I was doing and where I was going. So that window of running was the space for me to say, I've committed to a future that I don't want to be with this guy. I'm pretty much giving him my body whenever he wants it, though I don't agree or want to choose that. But that half hour with me on my trainers, that's when I can be me. That's when I can have that glimmer of hope that maybe I haven't lost totally myself. Maybe the future could be a little different. And so today on my bike was remembering why I'm doing this. This isn't about the medals. This isn't about the records. This is about giving ourselves permission to explore, to to go on those inner journeys, to embrace our demons sometimes, and also the shadows that, you know, it took a while for me to acknowledge that shadow of my life, because I saw it as a failing in myself. You know, you can't be raped by your fiance. He loves you. It's a failing in me. Maybe I'm the broken one here. So it's taken a long time to acknowledge that sometimes the shadows aren't pretty, and maybe that's why I am who I am today, that I'm striving for the mountains, but I know I need to let go of a lot of baggage along that way as well. So it's time for me to also, today was dealing with my shadows of that mountain rather than the sunshine basking at the top. But I feel it's important work to always look behind us, to work with what we're carrying with us and choose what's serving us and leave what isn't, with compassion for ourselves as well as those people who are also involved.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's I really appreciate your vulnerability and your presence in sharing that with us. What came to me as you were sharing that story is one of the kind of central features of adventure for us is that shedding of the layers. Who we are in the office, in the relationship, in the family, doesn't matter. And we just, all of that comes off. The job, the education, you know, we're stripped back to our kind of our bare essence. And it gives us room to be, to exist. I'm curious about the evolution from that person to this person.
Yeah.
Because you said you couldn't run a mile, right? And I think, you know, a lot of people probably can relate to that. Maybe not necessarily the abusive relationship, but the feeling of I don't know, helplessness or that, you know, that things are a lost cause. But here you are as evidence that you can turn it around. So I'd love to hear more about how that journey went for you.
Yeah. It's always easy, you know, it's a cliche, which I suppose why it works is it's easy to look back and join the dots, but at the beginning, there's no way I could have foretold what was coming up. But for me, stepping away from abuse and stepping into my power is synonymous. They're so intertwined, I can't tell one from the other. The first step for me, if it's to strive towards a goal or run away from a problem, is about just giving ourselves permission to believe something else is possible. You know, when I started running, I had asthma. I couldn't run a mile. I was wheezing, my legs were burning, the usual feeling of bile burning my throat when I was going to vomit because I was pushing too hard. But remembering I don't need to run a marathon in a day. It takes time to build a house with the foundations, with each brick. The same for us. We might have a goal or an ideal of what our perfect Kate would look like, or our perfect day. But it took months and years to build who I am today. So it'll take months and years to build who I will be in the future. And I love your trilogy of what you look at and the intersection with adventure and spirituality. And I think we always need to embrace that in our lives. And I make sure, as I just shared, I look at my physical strength, but I'm also working on my emotional, physical, emotional, spiritual, and also making sure mentally I'm as strong as that as well. So some days it wasn't running, it was looking in the mirror and liking myself. Can I smile rather than picking the faults and the wrinkles? How about picking some attributes? Because those gave us the confidence as well.
Yeah, you touched on something there about running from and running to, which I think is there's a really powerful distinction there.
Yeah.
Because if we're running from something, like wherever we are and wherever we're going, we're either running from it or we're running to there. And if you're running from it, it's still controlling you. But if you're running to the place that you're going, then that's forward motion, that's expansion, that's mental, physical, spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm. And it's still controlling us as well, because I think the key is to be in the moment. Mm-hmm. Like, as you said, I've got goals in the future in a month's time, but I need to honor today. I'm not doing what I'm going to be doing in the future. You're not on a wall in 12 hours time rock climbing. At this moment in this time, we are who we are. And it doesn't matter about the past nor the future. It's about us communicating effectively today, or committing to that cycle, or committing to that run. And some days it may be a mile, some days it may be 10. But at the end of the day, we can only do our best in that moment, in the present. And that's what we need to focus on.
And that's a really powerful reminder as well, is that we can be controlled by the future as well as the past. And that sometimes moving away from the past, like that half an hour of escape that you gave yourself, that moved the stuck energy, and you were literally running away from your house and running into your future, and you just kept running into your future and away from your past until now it seems like you're really running in the present moment more often than not.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's not a destination. It's like the analogy I use is we go to the gym, we get our ideal physique, we grow our muscles. We don't then give up for the rest of our lives because we've achieved it. We need to work on this every single day, and it's more like flying a plane. So I've been told you're never on track, but you're always heading towards the destination. You'll get there wherever they may be, but we just need to focus on the balance between the two.
Yeah, and that analogy of the plane is, or you could use a sailing boat as well. It's like there are so many forces that are pushing us, trying to knock us off balance, and it's just a constant refining of the direction that we're traveling in, and that can only be done here, and it can only be done now.
Yeah, very true. And as you said, I know you're a very big sailor, so we don't know what's coming up. The winds may change, the currents may be in a different swirl pattern. Please excuse my ignorance in technical language. And we may not have the energy to be able to move the sail either way. So it's about putting it all together when we need it.
Yeah, exactly. So you've gone from, as we've said, like running for half an hour to get away from the situation to now doing these incredible feats. Like you said, 4.5 hours on the bike is a warm-up now for you. What do you get from these extreme, these endurance events? So I was looking through the race across America, and it's 3,000 miles across 12 states with 190,000 feet of climbing, which, if I do the maths quickly, that's like more than 6 Everests of climbing on your bike. I mean, it seems like madness.
Yeah.
Why?
Maybe because it is. I think magic only happens when we don't do something extraordinary or different. And I feel alive when I feel afraid. I feel alive when I'm at the brink of knowing if I can do it or not. Otherwise, in recent times, I've been in lockdown for pretty much the entirety of this year. And it was too easy to control the toilet seats up, or the work surfaces aren't clean. And I went, my life is bigger than this. Life isn't meant to obsess over the detail. It doesn't matter if the fork is in within spoons, and, think big, Kate. Do something that makes you challenge your ideals. Start living with your mind. Start believing other things are possible. And I'm choosing physical activities to push me mentally to believe that we can elevate above certain things. And not once since I've set these challenges have I worried that the forks are with the knives. Because I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to live my life, to actually experience it, to feel it. I don't want to know everything was perfect and I can put myself in a little photo book and it's stored away. I want to leave here bruised and battered, with my wrinkles, with my stories, with maybe a missing finger because of frostbite. But isn't that a great story? Isn't that what we all strive for?
Yeah, and I could feel myself as you were talking. Just naturally took a big deep breath in and just like was like, and to hear you speak about that, about you come alive when you experience fear, when you don't know if you can make it, like that is a mindset that very few people understand. And that's where I thrive as well. And I have found it very challenging describing that to people in a way that is easily comprehensible and socially acceptable. How is it for you to live within that mindset in a world that is obsessed with safety?
Yeah, it's tough in short. And it's sad also because ironically we see a lot of posts on social around, the circle of comfort zone and greatness over here, but we post about it, but we don't experience it. What I found recently is I find multiple camps of people. They're either in awe or fearful for what I'm doing, but they could never imagine themselves doing it. Slightly judging me, saying that I shouldn't do this, or massively empowered and getting the message. So my challenge at the moment is to feed the positivity and make sure that I hold the space for people to learn whatever they need to learn. I'm not here to judge anyone's reactions to what I do or don't do. I'm here to just create that void to say, this is what most people do. This is what I'm doing. What are you going to do to fill the middle? So however they choose to fill that with making comments around negatively why I'm doing what I'm doing or otherwise, it's all perfect and great. We're all here to learn a lesson. So I see what their comments are, or I see what I'm trying to do is take it as a way of elevating myself above emotional reaction so I can respond and transform in the process, as well as holding the space for others to do that too.
What happens if you look at the people who are commenting negatively or judging as people who are, every time someone sends that kind of a comment, they're sending the message like, fuck off, Kate, I have my own thing to worry about and I'm not doing it. Now I feel compelled. And their judgment on you is their way of turning the volume down on that desire that they've been, but it's making it harder for them to do that. And if they keep following you and keep judging you, they're gonna be sucked into their own greatness. What if you look at it like that?
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. And we can only see in others what's in ourselves.
Yeah.
So if I'm seeing those negative comments, then I must in some essence believe them as well. So it's also a little flag for me to do some inner work as well. But yeah, I do my best to express compassion to everyone. And there are some people out there I think are crazy and don't agree with their principles. So it's also a way of making sure that I learn from others and making sure that I don't do that to other people as well, even if I agree with what they're doing or not.
One thing that I noticed when I did my climbing record, I gave up drinking for 2 years. And what I noticed was I was in the UK at the time, in London, and people couldn't cope. And what became really apparent to me is that me not drinking, going to pubs with them and not drinking with them, brought up their insecurity about the fact that they couldn't be in that situation and not have a drink. And it took me a while to realize that that's what was going on. But their insistence that I have just one shot, or come on, just have one. It was to make them feel better about not being able to do the thing that I was doing. I wonder if you get a sense of that as well.
Yeah, I'm very mindful I can't read people's minds, though I would love to. So I do my best to minimize my storytelling of people's motives, and I ask them moreover. But yeah, there are one or two people I can think of immediately that yes are using me as a highlighter of what their insecurities are. So it's easier to deal with pushing me away than actually dealing with what they should be processing themselves. So yeah, there's only so much I can do for other people. There's only so, because at the end of the day, we're all on our own journey as well. So again, it's that I'm here for you, but you have to open the door. If you are going to keep judging me or doing that, just one more, just do this, trying to undermine my commitment or my integrity to my journey, then we will just spend less time together. That's the short of it. So
I'm also drawn, just as we unpack this, I'm drawn to my own personal journey with the work of Joe Dispenza, because I discovered Joe Dispenza and I read read one of his books. For anyone, are you familiar with Joe Dispenza? Okay.
Yeah.
And for anyone watching who is not familiar, Joe Dispenza is a meditation teacher, and I mean, he's more than a meditation teacher. He teaches a way of creating the future that you desire. And when I first read the book, I wasn't ready. I was in a place of deep depression. I was not receptive, and I wrote it off as hooey, right? I was like, this is nonsense. But if I hadn't have had that experience and I hadn't have gone through that, then when I came back to Joe Dispenza again a few years later, I wouldn't have been, the road wouldn't have been paved for me to go on my own healing journey, of which reading his book, Becoming Supernatural, was a very big part. And so that phase that we have all been through of looking up at people who are doing amazing things and judging them is almost a necessary part of getting through our own healing process.
Yeah, very much so. And it wasn't Joe Dispenza, but I had a similar relationship with the book that I tried to read it 3 times and I kept falling asleep within it. It was just boring to me. Yet I persisted, and say 5 years later, it clicked and I went, that is the essence of life. This is the most powerful book I've read. And it took me 5 years to be able to read it in full. So yeah, The Power of Now.
The Power of Now. Eckhart Tolle.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we've all read that one at some point or another.
I think our libraries would look very similar, actually, which is naturally why we're talking as well, because we resonate, we get each other.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I'm in the middle of reading a book right now called Explorers of the Infinite, which is all about the spiritual lives of extreme athletes and the experiences that people have when they're right at the edge. When they're wingsuiting 200 miles an hour past 3 inches past the rock face, and the race across America actually is mentioned in the book. And I wonder if there's anything that you can talk about in your experience of connection to something else when you're doing these big events.
Yeah, I've done a few Ironman in my time, which, as you know, is a triathlon. It's about 2.4 mile swim, followed by a 112 mile bike ride, and then finishing off with a marathon. So it's quite an endurance sport in itself. And I would always make sure I trained without music or any distractions, because I really wanted to feel my body. I wanted to feel my surroundings, and I wanted to hear what was happening. And it was one of my last training rides. It was in April, which is winter or autumn in Australia, because that's where I was living at the time. And I cycled for 6.5 hours. I was so cold, I couldn't undo my shoes. So my friend Lydia took me off the bicycle and did my bicycle shoes. And I started to get dressed to go running, which to my friends sounded insane, because I could barely do my shoes up, let alone go running. But I had, half marathon training run to do. And it was in the pitch of black. the only flat land I had where I lived was actually on the railway track. So I used to wear a head torch running along the gravel railway tracks. And as soon as I saw a train coming, I'd hide in a bush and turn my light off, because it was also kind of borderline illegal what I was doing. But that's the only place I could train for my flat runs. And so I was running in this dark light. All I had was the silhouette of my shadow in front of me that I was running towards, partly stumbling as well because I was so cold. I was slightly dizzy in my eyesight as well. And behind me, I started to see a brighter light behind me, but it wasn't a train. And people in the village had come out to join me on their bicycles and shone the light in front of me. And it was in that moment that I, again, just burst into tears, because I realized that the entire life is just a big circle. At the beginning, when I started to run, my village of 2,000 laughed at me. I was this little Welsh girl saying I was going to become #1 in the world, and I could barely run, as I said, a mile. So, but over time, they saw the effort. Every day I'd turn up, and 6, 8 months later, they started to believe in me. So because I never put my light out, when my light was dimming, they came out with their own literal lights to shine it on my path so I could get home. And that is what I think drove me to win the next race, which was World Championships, because I knew my light had shone enough on the path that they were shining it for me as well.
That is beautiful. And that is my greatest desire as we embark on this project, is that our stepping out into our greatness, into our genius, and creating a new conversation in the world will inspire other people to, and I have felt that too. The people who laughed at me, who opposed me, are now going, like, of course these things are happening.
It's
and
beautiful.
They see that devotion.
Yeah. And what's wonderful is you aren't passing the baton to anyone. You're holding on to yours and helping others like theirs. There's more than enough to go around. We don't live in scarcity anymore. This is abundance. This is infinite possibilities, and we're embracing it. It's wonderful.
That story touched something really deep in me. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank
you.
Yeah.
It's such I'm there on the tracks, and I can feel how that feels for you to realize that the town is with you.
Yeah. And we forget, we don't think people watch. We don't think, we're told no one cares. We're told, just do what you want. No one's going to notice. We do. We see when friends stop to help strangers. We see people stepping up and away from their excuses into their greatness. We see it all. We feel it all. And, it's about time we all started to own and be responsible in every minute of our lives, because we are creating ripples every second we're awake. So I just love seeing these ripples from others, because I can feel the impact, and it's the ones that pick me up when I'm down.
I couldn't agree more.
I love what you said about I'm holding my baton and I'm using it to light other people holding theirs. We talk about an infinite pie. Right? There's so much talk of competition, of I need to protect my assets, my intellectual property, my this, my that, and it feels connected to me, because if I am using my gifts to, and in fact, I was having a conversation with someone on Facebook about this literally the other day. She posted in a group that I'm part of that she wants to launch her course, but she doesn't know how much content to put in the course, because she's worried that people are going to take it and do stuff with it, and what should I do? And I'm really worried and I'm really scared. And my response to her was, give it all away, all of it. Because yes, some people might take your material and pass it on, but they're going to pass it on saying, you need to speak to this person because she knows, like, I can give you the information, but she has the experience. And that brings us into this confluence, this like magical point where we learn these things when we go on adventures and through spirituality, and we bring them back into our business, and that's how we enrich humanity. That's how we make the world a better place for everyone to live in.
Yeah, very, very apt. And do you know what? If we three sat down and wrote one script and all three of us said it identically, we'd still have a tribe big enough to satisfy our needs. We'd still meet our KPIs. We'd still get our positive return on investment or whatever we want to measure. It doesn't matter, because your way is so unique and so is mine. We create the tribe that resonates with our voice. So it really doesn't matter even if we steal it, using the words loosely.
Yeah. I can eat as much of your pie as I can get my hands on, and you still have a full pie.
Yeah.
There's a shaman that I love listening to, and he has a brilliant 3-part YouTube video called Grief and Praise, and his name eludes me at the moment. But in the introduction to this 1-hour talk that he gives, he says in the intro, he talks about this exactly, where people are fighting for a piece of the pie, and he's like, there's enough trauma in this room right here to keep me working for 1,000 lifetimes. I don't need to be competing for a slice of the pie. There's more pie in this room here than I can serve in one lifetime.
Yeah.
And that's just in an auditorium. And let's say even if it was a stadium and held 100,000 people, out of the over 6 billion people on the planet, if that small room can, if there's enough work there for one healer for 1,000 lifetimes, there's lots of pie. Yeah.
And just like a glass of water, even if it runs out, it's refillable. We can make another pie,
Yeah. And like you said, if someone takes the conversation that we're engineering about this convergence, it doesn't weaken our position. It means that there's more people having that conversation, which means that more people are going to find us.
Yeah.
Right? Someone else is breaking ground for us, with us. And some of the people will be better served by us. Some will be better served by them. The point is the transformation.
Totally. Yeah. It's such a healthy way to be. And I call it the get mentality. There are people who just focus on what you're getting or what they can get from everything, but we feel it, even if we're not empaths per se, or it's a new phenomenon of trusting our guts and it doesn't logically make sense. We can sense rooms or people we want to continue to do business with. So the abundance mindset will always be rewarded because people they're more drawn to it. So it's a great way to be in business as well.
Yeah. I just need a second because something fired about something that you said earlier. I may or may not pick it up in this moment. I don't think it's going to come to me. If it does, we can pick it up later.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what you're doing in January for a bit, because it's quite inspiring. Why don't you tell us in your words?
Well, it started off as one world record attempt, which is the furthest distance on a static bicycle in 24 hours. And it has grown to 3. So the first hour will be to break the world record for the furthest distance in 1 hour, then the furthest distance in 12 hours, and subsequently the biggie, which is 24 hours. And I suppose the reason I chose it is because there's a male equivalent for those 3 world records, but there is no female for the 24-hour records. And this was a few years ago, I noticed this disparity, and it does get me questioning that we see these buzzwords floating around a lot, like the word resilience, the word equality, the word, diversity and inclusion are very popular at the moment. Yet we need to start actually taking action behind those words to make sure that we are displaying equality, we are displaying diversity and inclusion, and we're living a resilient life. So in all honesty, looking at my business, I knew I needed a challenge to step up and keep me in that fear, out of my comfort zone, because that's what I tell my clients to do. And it would be hypocritical of myself if I didn't challenge myself. But I also wanted to open up the deeper conversation of, you know, when we look at our role models who are portrayed on our televisions, our social media, inadvertently on bus stops as well, even if we're not inviting them necessarily into our lives, do we see the entire world reflected in those people? Or is it a select elite few that seem to get extra coverage? And as a woman, I notice there are a lot more men being represented. Yet I also notice I'm being represented unequally as well, because I am white and because I come from a certain socioeconomic background as well. So this journey isn't just about the physical pushing myself. It's also a deeper conversation to say to society and to give other people permission. We need to see more representation in these leaders, in our pioneers, in the people that we strive to be like. So that the world will display, not just with words and hashtags and the usual trends, but with actual action, some real diversity, some real inclusion. And so that platform that I'm using is my sport to, with intent, start these conversations with businesses, not just the nice little girl on a bicycle that I think some people think that I'm turning up just to be.
It's amazing to have such a powerful why driving what you're doing.
Thank you.
So what's the best result for you? Let's assume you smash all the world records, because you will. I get the feeling that's not actually the point from what you said. So what is the ultimate outcome that you desire from taking part in this?
Oh gosh, I got tingles when you've asked me that question. The best outcome is every family starts to have a conversation to say, where are my unconscious biases happening? How am I favoring men over women, whites over blacks? How am I actually feeding the divide of the rich poor? What is my role within this? And what steps can I take to start leveling the playing field with truth, not this tick box society that we see in some businesses? I really want everyone to start opening up that conversation, because I don't know the answer. I barely know the question. I need everyone to start having these conversations so that we can all collectively evolve away from this into a new state of being and operating, because we can't fix it from this current mindset. We're just far too fixated on the hows, we're far too fixated on the small details, but those are just the flags. We need to dig deep into those roots, and some of those roots aren't mine to dig out, but I can hold the space for the people to do the work so the roots can be removed.
Yeah. I grew up visiting my grandparents' farm on the weekends, and one of the things, the farm is where I realized I got introduced to adventure. Crawling around on the hay bales and swinging on the ropes and climbing the ladders and milking the cows and, watching the shit flow down the gutter into the manure pit and out onto the spreader and onto the field and riding the combines and the tractors. And that was my introduction to adventure, was growing up on my grandparents' farm. And, I lost the plot again. What were you saying?
Roots, digging out roots.
Right. So one of the things that happened on the farm was that my grandma, we would play in the garden, and we'd steal the peas, so we also got to weed the garden, right? But maybe because we helped her in the garden, she didn't shame us when we stole the carrots and the peas, because nothing tastes better than carrots that have come straight from the garden with a bit of dirt on them still, or peas or corn right off the stalk. It's just the best thing ever. And so recently, this idea of weeding has really come alive for me. And we live in a world where we're right and wrong, right? Where the knives are with the forks, and the cap isn't on the toothpaste, and your right wing or left wing or whatever it is. And what connected for me is that these things, this right and wrong, it's all symptomatic. And and there's this distortion that exists, this like root, and we just keep cutting it off at the stalk when we talk about these things of right and wrong, and it just keeps growing back. And when you talk about rooting it out, it's like the idea that's really landing for me now is we need to get real. We need to stop living in a world of right and wrong, and we need to get to the root and be a genuine, vulnerable, fully realized human being and say, this is where my soul is. This is, and when we're having a conversation about right and wrong, there's a root for me and a root for you. And those two things, like before we ever met, before we ever started having a conversation about who's right and who's wrong, our ancestors preloaded this conversation so that when we met, it wasn't a matter of who fired the first shot. It was an issue of like, this conversation already existed before we even laid eyes on each other. And when we look at it from that perspective, then it's an opportunity for us to go to our roots and pull out the root. And what my grandma taught me was that when we leave the root behind, even if it's just a part of the root, the weed grows back. And that simple teaching that she laid on me as a child has come back full circle into this personal growth work. And I'm now looking for where are those roots, and what are the tools to loosen up the dirt and work it out. And some weeds, you give them a little tug and the whole root system comes out and it's this long, and other weeds, they have like a little root like this, but like if you don't work it out properly, it doesn't come out at all. It just holds stubbornly into the soil. And our beliefs, our patterns, our traumas, our ancestral stuff is so much like that. And so that was the link for me.
Yeah, it's very true. And I'm just curious, what do you guys have a certain, when something happens, that one of your root, you need to start digging and finding out what that trigger point is? Do you have any sort of symbols or something that happens within you that that's a sign to do some work?
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm learning to do is I'm very much within this last year learning to do that. And the thing that I've learned in the last couple of weeks that's really powerful is that, as children, we had the desire to be loved infinitely, 24/7, on demand, exactly the way we wanted. And by the time we realized that that wasn't possible, I don't think we could even verbalize that. And so then we switched the terrible twos. We switched to try and control our entire environment. And then we realized we can't do that. So we strive to be perfect. And we strive to be perfect so that we can have that like omnipotent rulership of our environment that we failed to get initially as children, as tiny humans. And what that does is it sets up a belief system where if I was perfect, I could have all of the love that I wanted. That's the internal judgment. And if you did everything exactly the way I wanted it to be done, then I could also be loved. And we create these, because it then becomes a shameful thing to admit that we're not loved because of this belief system that gets set up. We seek out substitutions for love, right? You need to follow me, obey me. I need to prove to you that I understand. You need to prove to me that you understand. All of these like needs, unmet needs, the root of that is actually simply the desire to be loved. And so I'm learning when I judge Tom that it's not actually Tom, it's my desire to be loved. And it's a distorted expression of the love that's coming through. And the more often I can do that, like my emotional reactivity is decelerating. But I'm not human. I mean, I'm human still, unfortunately.
So the short version of that story is when you judge someone else, you know it's time to do work on you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine is anger. When I express anger, or my knee-jerk, no, don't know what you're talking about. I pull out my intellect cards. I know more than you. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me just do some work.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got that one as well. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
We are human. And isn't that a beautiful thing?
It is a beautiful thing.
Perfectly imperfect.
I'm still striving towards not being human in this physical incarnation.
Maybe in the next life.
Maybe in the next life.
Yeah. Or in this one, please let me know if you achieve that.
In the meantime,
by the potential of your future.
In the meantime, I'll go on an adventure.
Yeah. You know, adventure, I think we look a lot at the external, like, you know, doing things, but inner adventure is just as exciting. It's just as dramatic.
Yeah,
totally. So how do people get behind you, support you, contact you, further your mission? What for people who are watching, like what can they do to support you?
I would love to get in touch with people. Please reach out to me, send messages, follow me. I'll follow back. So my name is Kate Strong. My website is katestrong.co, and I'm Kate Strong 01 on most social platforms. So yeah, I do my best to share the truth rather than the picture perfect moments. So don't expect anything too grandiose from studios, expect reality. But I think that's the beauty of life, is to sort of remove this veil of curtain. As you said, we don't have to be perfect all the time. It's about sharing the moments of weaknesses and reality to make sure we're giving other people permission to share. I think we've got enough of those models and role models. We need some human people now.
Yeah, totally. And when is the big day?
Well, it starts at 3 UK time, 3 p.m. on the 7th of January 2021, and I will be finishing at 3 p.m. on the 8th of January 2021.
And I believe you're going to stream it live. Like, is there anything that you can share about that, or should people just kind of follow you for details?
I would love to share details, because it would mean I'd actually organize myself and I know what I'm doing. But most probably it will be live streams on Facebook. If I can learn how to do other areas, then I will. And I'll also be doing some drop-in webinars, so people can actually dial in, cycle with me, or ask questions, if not myself, but my team, if I'm a little bit, you know, focused on the cycling bit. We'll also be doing moments where if people did want to get on their bikes, they can cycle along with me, as well as just hearing me talk. And my physio will be doing post-yoga stretches, so you can learn how to release the physical and tension, as well as getting into our emotional connectivities as well. So I'm intending it to be a festival of ourselves. And the plan is, at the end, I'd love to hear what everyone did with those 24 hours. You know, this is what I did. What did you do? Come along and share. So if we went to what everyone else did.
Sharing that, I just thought how brilliant it would be if your village crossed the finish line with you.
Well, I'm on a static bike, so I'm not going anywhere fast.
Oh, you're not going anywhere fast. Oh, so you're not like actually on the 24 hours, you're just on a static bike.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's gonna be a challenge in and of itself.
It's posing a lot of challenges, because, not to get too much details, but if your legs spin 70 times a minute and you're not moving, there's a lot of heat and friction generated. So I'll leave that to your imagination. But yes, it's also the mental. There's no distraction, and it's very
stare at.
So it's quite exciting.
I imagine there'll be some deep inner work that happens during those 24 hours for you as well.
Yeah, and just to stay awake for 24 hours. So and to eat I have 17,500 calories I'll be burning that I need to replace. So lots of cake.
Well, Kate, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful conversation. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I have no doubt that everybody tuning in has also. Is there anything, just as we kind of bring it to a close, is there anything final that you want to share to close us out?
Just to aim to be the best of yourself. That's all we can ever be. It's not up to us what happens outside of that. I don't know if I'll get my records or anything, but I know that I'll be doing my best every single day, and that's all we can ever focus on. So focus on our inner self, and the outside will reflect that accordingly, but that's not up to us. We can only focus on us.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Beautiful. Well, thank you very much, Kate. And thank you everybody for tuning in. This has been the Adventure Effect Live with Tom and Curtis. Please do subscribe, share, like, all of that good stuff. And we will see you next week. Bye for now.